On episode 159, I'm joined by Jane Finette. Jane is an author, a leadership expert, and the founder and executive director of the Coaching Fellowship, which coaches young women leaders in social change. Formerly a big tech executive, Jane has dedicated her life to achieving equality for women by empowering them to make a global impact. She is the author of Unlocked: How Empowered Women Empower Women. Jane and I have a great conversation. For links to the Coaching Fellowship and her book, check out the show notes. And here we go for episode 159 with Jane Finette. Enjoy, my friends.
81 cents for every dollar a man earns, that is what a woman is earning, which means, again, US data, but 2/3 of women have the potential of retiring into poverty.
Jane, welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. How are you?
Hello, Ryan. I'm doing great. Thank you. It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you very much for having me as your guest.
It's great to see you, and I can see your book over your shoulder.
I know, my shameless plugging over there.
I'm not going to dive into that straight away. I want to know a little bit about 15-year-old Jane and, you know, having the heart of this activist. Take us back to where it all begins.
Oh, thank you for starting there. That's wonderful. And well, as we were just saying, I mean, we're both Brits, and so we're both very familiar with the UK's school uniform, which I think is still pretty prevalent. I've been out of the UK for many years, but I think it's still a thing. Yeah, and you know, I mean, I was just enraged with the injustice of girls not being able to wear trousers. I mean, I'm kind of old. By this point, I'm getting older every day, of course, but it wasn't that long ago, really, that girls were not able to wear trousers at school. It was insane. So, yeah, one crazy winter time, we just had enough. And I was chair of a student council and just rallied a group of girlfriends to come and lobby the board of governors, you know, as it was, to make a change. And it was kind of extraordinary, actually, because it happened very quickly and very easily. And what I think I learned there was, you know, sometimes we think things are actually incredibly difficult to make a change. And yet, when we point out the injustice and we bring awareness, things can change. And it happened really quickly. And I was so shocked. And we were all delighted and very warm thereafter, wearing trousers to school. But you know, it was kind of crazy to think that this just hadn't happened before, because no one had pointed the finger and said this is wrong. And then people were like, oh yes, of course it's wrong. And of course, you know, so we were able to make a change. And I think that's such a lesson for today still, which is when we can bring that awareness and we can bring it into consciousness, then actually, you know, things aren't that difficult to change. It's just, do we have the will and do we have the knowledge and intention to do it? Yeah. Yeah, I was a bit of a rebel, I think, right?
I like that. Yeah, and I like to think about energy, and I like to think about putting all our energy into not fighting the way things are, but fighting for the way that things could be, and putting energy into the future. How do you see that? Do you stand against stuff or do you stand for stuff?
Well, I'm always about building the future that we want to see, right? You know, I mean, every single day we have choices about where we put our energy and our time. Yeah. And I know, like, we have some pretty, you know, catastrophic things that we're dealing with, right? I mean, as a humanity, whether it's the climate crisis or racial injustice or, you know, clearly the global pandemic, which continues to shape shift, and it's going to be with us for a while. And yet, it doesn't serve us to be coming from a place of scarcity and coming from a place of fear, because that's the world we end up creating. So I'm all about building toward the future we want to see, even if it's not the place that we get to inhabit right now.
Hey, my friends, thank you for watching so far. If you're enjoying what you're watching, please do subscribe to our channel and considering sharing this with someone that you love. I also wanted to let you know we've got some incredible merchandise available. We've got tees, we've got hoodies, we've got trucker caps, and our beanies are really popular at the moment. For a great way to show that you're part of this community and that we are always better than yesterday, head to our website. You can check it out in the show notes. And let's get back to the interview. Before I jump too far into the now, into the present, I know that you've held some really prominent leadership positions within eBay and Mozilla and Sotheby's. And I like the way that you describe your role as building and empowering global communities. And there's this one phrase that I've seen that I really, really love, that gets me excited, is the intersection of community building and human potential.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Wow, it's a lot of words, isn't it, really? Oh my gosh, I'm always this person that's supposed to be striving not to play the BS bingo. In particular, I mean, I think I particularly witnessed this at eBay, but it wasn't conscious, and it wasn't sort of something which I could then direct and accelerate until I was at Mozilla, where Mozilla are the folks behind the Firefox web browser. And when I joined Mozilla, I was employee 103. Or at that point, we had about 100 million Firefox users with 103 employees. But pretty much apart from Linux, the world's largest open source community for a consumer product. And so we had tens of thousands of volunteers, whether they were building and localizing Firefox or supporting it or marketing it. And this was the first time I had really encountered the power of a community in the business sense. And that what we were doing was taking decentralized systems and giving people the power and influence at the edges of the system. So this wasn't about leadership. That wasn't about a hierarchical system. For sure, there were checks and balances. If you got to run the security unit in the software, then we need to know you and trust you over a period of time. There were gatekeepers, so to speak. But mostly, this was about creating communities and empowering communities to do their best work. And I'm sure, Ryan, you know this too. When you give people the opportunity and the freedom to create and manifest, they will surprise you again and again. And this is what happened within Mozilla. I mean, we only built Firefox in English, and it was in 95 different language versions when I left 10 years later, all done by volunteers in those countries. Wow. The biggest point of my career, I was responsible for all of the Firefox user base in sort of engagement and retention. 500 million Firefox users, with I think we had about 800 employees then. So, but this was the power of community coming together around a shared mission and vision, but also that ability for people to contribute and bring their full selves and their potential into the work that they were, so jazzed to do and volunteer all those hours for.
That's amazing. There's a piece of research that makes me smile, is that those people that go away from the normal Internet Explorer, Safaris, and they go out of their way to go and get a third-party browser in terms of Mozilla, they're more likely to be innovative, they're more likely to be entrepreneurial. Would you resonate with that?
Well, I think it's about, we used to call folks that chose Firefox conscious choosers.
Yeah.
I mean, that was your marketing behind the scenes kind of speak. And so, and it's kind of not fair really to say, this is like the people who aren't choosing, the people who are still on Internet Explorer or something like this aren't choosing, because not everyone is so web savvy and all these things, but rather, and those that are will tend to make a different choice if they know more about it. And Mozilla was, it still is, I should say, a nonprofit organization. So their mission is to make sure the internet is publicly accessible resource, for open, accessible to all, so not owned by any government or company or individual. We got some work to do, I reckon, on that front, but we're I am not the biggest fan of Facebook, but tying up systems and stuff. Anyway, I know we're talking technology, and that's my passion in another life.
I needed people just to hear a little bit of your background and the great work that you've done. How did you get into coaching?
It was Mozilla, back to Mozilla. But
Mhm.
I had the incredible opportunity to get access to leadership development and
Mm.
coaching.
Mhm.
And the kind of the side story is, I was in there in the executive team, and then suddenly all these things became available to me.
Mm.
And I'd never even heard of executive coaching. It wasn't that long ago, like 12, 13 years ago. And it cracked my world open, Ryan. And
Mm.
I was like, whoa, like, oh my gosh, I had made some decisions in my career where I was choosing on purpose, but they weren't so conscious. I wasn't so aware. And that I was really able to see things about myself which I intuitively kind of knew, but it wasn't clear, and I wasn't making purposeful decisions based on my values and what I'm innately good at and all these things, and understanding what was holding me back and all these kinds of things. And when that became unearthed to me through this gift of coaching, wow, like, yeah, like I could understand how to find the congruence of choice and where I was going to put my heart and my input and
Yeah. Yeah.
my time, of course, and energy. Um, and what came to me was, and this is how I ended up starting a coaching fellowship, was that I wished I'd had this when I was starting
Mhm.
out, when I was
Mm.
25 years old, because I did make some pretty good choices, but I also made some pretty rubbish choices
Sure.
as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you look at my resume, I definitely, like, I'm six different people. And was very unsure. And obviously some of this comes with age too, and you just know
Mhm.
yourself and you've done a bunch of things and you're like, not that
Mm.
anymore, or that was never that. But I do think that I'd have done things differently. And so when I founded the Coaching Fellowship, which is the nonprofit I founded, um, it's all about helping young women leaders, particularly in the social change
Yeah.
space, get access to this gift of coaching and leadership development. Because the younger you are,
Mm.
when you get access to more of yourself, I do believe that your impact can be greater. And then particularly in this field, we
Yeah.
stop women burning out because they're
Yeah.
giving and giving and giving to the point that they just have to check out because their
Mm.
bodies will force them to.
Yeah. I love the phrase that you use, is that when you help a woman rise, we all rise. And it's very similar to what we say here at Always But Yesterday, is we rise by lifting others. And where does your heart for helping women come from?
Um, well, I think, it's for my heart is for helping every living thing actually reach its full
Yeah.
full potential. So
Mm.
men, women, plants. I'm a big plant
Mm.
person.
Mhm.
Animals, my weak spot. But the thing that really is hard, I think, as a woman, is that we're still working on every single front to find equality and
Yeah.
choice. And on the surface, it seems, oh, things are great for women and so on. But when you really start to dig into the numbers, but here in America, I mean, some US data, 81 cent on the dollar women are earning sorry, 81 cent for every dollar a man earns. That is what a woman is earning,
Mhm.
which means, again, US data, but 2/3 of women have the potential of retiring into poverty, because
Mm.
that just stacks up over time.
Yeah.
And you look at the number of girls that didn't get to go to school today around the world. 32 million girls didn't go to school, not because they didn't want to, but because they
Sure.
weren't allowed, or because of the
Mm.
threats of sexual violence. And it's just number after number after number, and you can get really low and really depressed about it all. And yet, Ryan, coming back to where we started our
Mhm.
conversation, like, we can't be victims in that. We have to keep building to a more positive future. And I do believe that when you help a woman, you are helping
Mm.
many more people, because the woman will help everyone around her
100%.
rise. So you get that multiplication
Mm.
effect. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Dr. Bruce Lipton, and in his work that I've just listened to, he says that the future of leadership is mammalian, as in mammals by nature. And no one understands this better than females. That nature of nurturing, of caring, of being good custodians, and it's really powerful, And to be cliche, saying the future is female, there's certainly the future is heart-centered, and I think few know that as well as women. And I guess the conversation I want to open up is obviously about your book and how we can inspire both two types of women. One, the woman who can help another, and then other is inspire the woman who might want a little bit of help. But secondly, or three, is the men listening, how we can be good allies, good supporters, because ultimately we are, I don't want to say the word we, men are predominantly creating cultures within their organization, and that will either see women rise, or in instances where I've seen, you create a almost queen bee syndrome, where the woman has had to adapt to fit into a competitive hierarchical culture, and it kind of changes the nature of who people are when they go to the workplace. So let's start with the book. What's it called, and who is it for?
Thank you. My book is called, it's my first book. I'm a first time author. It's called Unlocked: How Empowered Women Empower Women. And I did write it for women. I was incredibly despondent, as I was just saying, about all those statistics, which got infinitely worse during the pandemic. So this was 18 months ago when I first started writing. And yet here I am running a women's organization, empowering women. I'm like, whoa, gosh, if I am this down and this depressed and this stuck, how is everyone else feeling? You know, women checking out of the workplace, women losing their jobs en masse, because they tend to be in the consumer service industry, which was hit, of course, massively by the pandemic and so on. I wrote it for women so that they, you know, the book is all about telling inspiring stories, but it's also about practical, easy advice, steps that we can take every day to help a sister. Because after helping so many women through the coaching fellowship, what I had seen was that it actually, you know, the things which made a massive difference in people's lives and women's lives, it wasn't necessarily the introduction to Bill Gates or the $1 million they raised. You know, of course they needed all those things too, but it was rather the stories that they tell me were about another woman that had helped them with a bit of advice, or they had been seen by someone, recognized, like, you're doing important work, you are important. And that it was that almost a reflection that someone had given them, that they were capable, that they were more than enough, that made the shift for them. And I was like, wow, but we can all do that. We all have the power to do a version of that. I mean, you asked about the audience, and we're going to talk about gentlemen as well. One of the biggest surprises, Ryan, for my book was how many men have bought the book, have read the book, have told me about what they read. The first gentleman that, the first person that shared my book on social media and left me a review was a former male work colleague. And I was shocked. I was so shocked. And I said, you know, I did not expect men to read the book, and I'm so honored that they are, because what it is shedding light on is so many of these different areas that women are struggling with. And, you know, maybe men have heard of the gender pay gap, but they don't know about women as first-time managers struggling to get a foothold, or they don't know about you know, how difficult it is for women to retire, or you know, these things. So it's kind of an unearthing of all of the various different things that we're struggling with.
The one thing I encountered time after time after time in my time in the police here in the UK was that you'd have an opportunity for a promotion, and a very able female, say with 8 out of the 10 requirements, would doubt herself because she hasn't got the 2. A male counterpart might have just 4 of those 10, and he's like, I'm going for it. And there was just something, you know, I might be oversimplifying things, but
no, you're not. It's actually, it's research which is now, gosh, I think it's like 15 years old, right? And I do reference it in the book. It was a study that was done at Hewlett Packard where they noticed this also happening. And it became this kind of like infamous study. Some of the unpacking of that was, people thought that it was women who are, we're not confident enough. We don't believe in our abilities enough. And for sure, there's some of that comes into it. Where they landed with some of that research was that women are so good at following the rules that they just followed the rule. They're like, well, the rule is, this is the job spec, and it says you should do all these things, and we can't do some of them. So we're like, okay, well, that's not for me. It wasn't a confidence like, oh, I'm not good enough, but rather, I just don't have it, And yet when women do apply for jobs, which are, maybe there is a little bit of like, well, I don't have everything there, they will get hired way more than guys and be much more successful. And some of this is and I speak a lot with women, particularly about how they can influence the young girls in their lives, their children, their daughters, and we want our girls to follow the rules, right? There's still that, I hate to say it too, it's so gendered and stereotypical, but like that girls should be quiet and studious and genteel, and it's okay that boys are rambunctious and break the rules. And
well, at home, that's my daughter.
Yeah, do you have girls?
I have a 9-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter, and my daughter is the free spirit, and I have to remind myself every time not to kick that out of her, not to downplay that, because I have to trust that that's going to serve her well as a free-spirited, strong-willed. But it's really interesting. I mean, I've always been around women in work settings. The majority of my leadership development group are women. So I have a heart for helping and nurturing the talent within women. I love nothing more than being that transfer of belief for them. And I don't know where that comes from. I mean, I had a single parent mum, worked several jobs, raised, and she's my hero, sort of like. So maybe there's a soft spot I have there, but maybe there are a group of men listening that have an empathy and a heart for the development of women, but maybe don't understand necessarily how. And I know that in your book, you talk about the 3 barriers to equality in terms of broken rung, you talk about money, and I think you talk about network. We'll come to network second, but how can male leaders in the workplace help with this broken rung?
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving voice to this. And I think it's hard to know where to start, and it's been complicated as well, I think, for men over the last 10 years as well. It's just the kind of various different women's movements. Men, I think, can get a little bit stuck, like, oh, I don't, I want to help and I daren't help and I don't know how to help, and it feels like it's a hot potato of a thing, actually. But I think we are moving beyond that. One of the things, and you mentioned the broken rung, and I do get on my high horse about it, but I'm incredibly passionate about us really taking our younger women into our raising them up. I'm missing a word there, but under our wing. That's what I'm trying to say. And they, because they aren't given the opportunities that our young men are, and then we wonder why. We turn sort of 15, 20 years down the line, and we're like, where are all the women CEOs and the VPs? And we're like, well, for every 100 women, only 81 white women, 70 something for Latino, and 58 Black women are actually promoted into that first managerial role. So I hear men tell me very often, oh, women and young women, they need mentors, and honestly, we do need mentors, but we have mentors coming out of our ears. What we really need are sponsors. We need people, that is both men and women, but particularly for men, because they tend to hold more of the positions of power and influence in the org, that would see a woman and advocate for her to get promoted, advocate for her to do a project which, she hasn't done before, and so on. So actually, and that, of course, it takes a lot of commitment, and you yourself are going to become more visible by sponsoring that woman. But really, this is the only way we're going to get more women into those positions, is when men advocate for them to take it.
Yep. Let that be a challenge to us all. You talk about the power of a network, and I know that you talk about virtuous circles. What's a virtuous circle?
People like, a good thing creating a good thing that creates more good things. I mean, it's a flywheel, and I talk about it particularly in the sense of women doing this. But women will create these natural kind of virtuous circles, and we know how to do that, as you were saying, like just heart forward, just generally, giving more than we take, and that in itself empowering someone else who is going to give, and so on and so forth. So I'm curious. I really want to get that flywheel turning faster and faster, because I think that's how we'll get to global change, if you'll indulge me in my idealism. The network piece, and again, this is something where gentlemen can help. So women are, as we know, we build relationships. We're amazing connectors. We're hard forward connectors. But when it comes to networking, in air quotes, we start checking out in the droves. There's research that says it makes us feel dirty, and it's just feels so, it's like worse than doing your taxes, right? And I think it is because it feels very transactional.
Yeah.
And that women are kind of like, well, this is not how I built relationships. And so when it comes to advancing our careers, we'll build very strong networks within our organization. So you probably see this many times inside orgs. Women have very strong teams and allies within their companies. But when they leave, they'll take some of those connections with them, but they aren't generally useful into their next role. So they'll have to start again. And men there's a lot of what they call homophily, which is where they, and this is for men and women too, but it's kind of like we tend to stick to people who look like us and sound like us and talk like us. And because there are more men in those positions, again, of power and influence, then we look like each other, so we're going to spend more time with each other. There are more things. We'll go on the golf course. I mean, it's cliched, but we'll go out drinking on a Friday night after work together. And so
and more situational blindness.
Yeah, absolutely right.
More blind spots, because they're all got the same blind spots.
That's not healthy for business. It's not healthy for life. And to have the full spectrum of opportunity ahead of us. So that is something that men can do, which is instill the importance of network building in women, and for them to do it in a way which is right for them. And that we will open that door. We'll say, you should speak to this awesome person, and then encourage them to also ask that person, who else should I be speaking to? And I would say, I mean, this is true for everyone, but we should be meeting one new person every week for a 30-minute Zoom call, or a cup of coffee somewhere. That is 50 people in a year, let's say. That's 50 new fantastic things you'd have learned, opportunities down the line, just keeping you fresh, meeting another awesome human being. But we don't make time for it. And yet these weak sort of ties, these potentials for chance meetings and so on, we have to manifest that. We actually have to create those opportunities.
Well, there's another challenge set to our listeners, is to go and connect with good people. It's something that's been life-giving for me. It's one of the very reasons I do this podcast, and I get to have an excuse to bring people to have these conversations, and I get to have fun at the same time. You've been interviewed several times about your book, many, many times. What is the one question you've not been asked that you wish people would ask you about your book?
It's a bit of a cheat because I was asked it in my author circle. So there's a bunch of women who read the book for me, and I call them they were my author circle community, my heroines, and they asked me this question, but I've never been asked it publicly, which is, what did I learn about myself in writing this book as a woman? And presumably you'd like.
And how would you like to answer that one?
And because where to start? So one of the keys in the book is be the example. And
Mm,
we know about role models, and we know all these things since forever.
mm,
The sort of the spin I put on it is to be really real and be really authentic as a woman leader, because like you rattled off my career. It sounds amazing, right? I look back and I'm like, whoo, who was that woman?
mhm, mhm,
And yet, Ryan, I would say that what I learned about this book is that for myself is that I have a voice,
mm,
and I don't believe that I really believed that until I started writing this book,
mm,
and that I do have things to say.
mm,
And it's I've never been a very public person. I've always been behind the scenes. It's just the kind of the epitome of many women,
mm,
where we're very happy to do our work and help the women around us, but actually standing up and taking a bigger
mm,
step
mm.
is not something we can all do. And yeah.
But I can see the passion and the emotion that you're showing for this topic. I love it. It's a real depth of heart to this, and it's just amazing because I think here is it's demonstrating a style of leadership that maybe isn't portrayed on the television. That's one that's in the shadows. Maybe it's one that's in someone's ear all the time, just
Mhm.
rising. Every interaction. I call it heart print. I think
Oh, it's
our
beautiful.
heart print is the every interaction that we have with our human beings around us, whether that be positive or negative. And
Mhm.
thank you for the heart print that you've been creating. It's I'm sure there are communities that are infinitely better through your leadership.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you, dearly.
What does the phrase "always better than yesterday" inspire in you?
Don't give up. Don't give up. Yeah, it's we get the chance to renew again. What's past is past. We can learn from it, but to create again, and to try is yeah, it's something that I'm really passionate about. I'm all about putting stuff out there and seeing if it works, and if it doesn't work, we'll learn from it and we'll try again.
Yeah,
So yeah.
powerful. Thank you so much for your time. Where can people connect with you?
Thank you. I do have a website. It's simply my name.com. So janefinette.com. And you can kind of find everything from there. So links to the coaching fellowship, links to my book. If people want to connect on LinkedIn, I'm always open,
Yeah.
and just let me know where you heard me from, so I can I can respond. But thank you again, Ryan, for giving me a great opportunity to share more and
Yeah.
share more about what I'm really passionate about.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing your voice. Thank you for having the courage to bring your heart into the world. And we'd be honored if you'd leave us a final thought from your good self.
Oh, well, it is my greatest wish, and this is not just for women, it really is for everyone, that we have the power and the wisdom. We have everything that we have inside us to make
Mm,
this world a much more beautiful, safer, equitable one for everyone. Um, and with that, just to go do something today, right? Go take some action.
yep. True story. Jane, thank you so much.
Thank you, dearly, Ryan. Thank you.